So when I heard this slogan, drive all blames into one, and then heard the teaching on it about it meant to drive the blames into ego clinging, first of all, I wasn't really sure what ego clinging was. And secondly, I had trouble with the word blame. So I've read a lot about this slogan over the years, and have always been challenged to try to understand it myself in a way that was very personal and helpful to me, you know, in my own life when things got difficult. And so, for instance, suppose I was very provoked by somebody and I thought, drive all blames into my ego. Somehow it didn't exactly help because it seemed a little too abstract for me anyway. And also it came a little close to blame myself, which is what I always did habitually anyway, so that wasn't too helpful. Now the word blame actually is a good one in some sense. I understand why Chogyam Trungpa and the Nalanda Translation Committee chose this translation and used the word blame, because it's kind of getting at what we usually do, which is blame somebody else for our suffering or our pain or our discomfort or our I think, yeah, blame somebody else for our discomfort, our pain. So from that point of view, it's good because it kind of highlights what we just do without thinking twice, you know. Like something makes us angry, and, well, it wasn't just out of the blue that we got angry. There's usually a person or situation involved that made us angry. So this huge finger, our finger, that I know the finger sometimes has other connotations, but let's just say it points at somebody else and says, you are to blame, or the government is to blame, or some general situation is to blame. So since it's kind of a counter-habitual to think that there's something in us that's responsible for this, as I say, I've always grappled with this slogan, wanting it to be useful on the spot. And to say that, to blame myself for the situation, as I'm saying, didn't really help, because that was a habitual pattern that I and most of us already have. If we're not blaming Mike and Jane, we're blaming ourselves, you know. It's like the blame is, we lay it on somebody. So I don't know how long ago it was, but I was listening to Zir Kanchal Rinpoche teach, and I think he was teaching on Shantideva, and he used the expression, the propensity to be bothered. And when he said that, something clicked in me, and I began to understand this slogan in a slightly different, more helpful way, I guess you could say. So I want to kind of unwrap what I'm saying here. So the word propensity that Rinpoche used, I believe it was, he was pointing to a Tibetan word called bakcha, and which he often calls tendencies, our tendencies. But in this case, he said the propensity to be bothered. So I began to think maybe a better way of thinking about this slogan was to just get rid of the blame altogether in the whole thing and ask the question, what is it that makes me suffer? What is it that causes me pain? When Mary says to me something that really offends me, maybe I perceive that she did it quite intentionally also, and I'm provoked, asking the question at that point, well, what is it that's making me suffer here, right now? And the first thing is Mary, because Mary just blatantly embarrassed me in front of all these people. And later, when I get together with them, they're all going to say, poor you and bad Mary, you know, and that will be very gratifying. And it will, and my horrible feeling I'm feeling inside will definitely escalate if they all say, well, really, Auntie Pema, I think it was your fault, you're to blame. Then I would just feel even more horrible. So the question still remains, what is it that's causing me to suffer? So this is really an interesting question to ask yourself when you get provoked in some way, which I bet will happen before dinner tonight. So the one reason it's helpful to ask this question is because it kind of interrupts the automatic habitual response to do what you usually do, which is to blame somebody for something. And you see, actually, we can have a lot of kindness and sympathy towards ourselves in that situation, because the reason we do that is because we feel really bad and we want to feel better. So our method, is to somehow, it feels like if we could blame it on somebody, then it would diminish our suffering. However, it usually doesn't. It's more like Ziger Kuntrell often uses the expression that you already have this ember or little flame of pain in your heart, and then to start blaming somebody else with a very solid storyline about them, you, making the whole thing very solid. It's like he uses the expression pouring kerosene on this little flame, and it gets bigger and bigger. So that's could bring tears to your eyes, that all of us do that, that in order to feel better, we make matters worse by kind of escalating our anger or escalating our feeling of inadequacy. Somehow we escalate it with this big storyline about either blaming somebody else or blaming ourselves.